The judgment of the void, the massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Tribunal stretched beyond human comprehension, its walls pulsing with ethereal light that seemed to bend reality itself. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the vast space, her hands clasped behind her back as she faced the assembled representatives of the Celestial Coalition. Around her, holographic displays showed the evidence of humanity's crimes, flickering images of Earth's wars, its polluted skies, and the rapid expansion of human colonies across nearby star systems. The silence was deafening. Elena could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Chin shifted nervously, his diplomatic credentials meaning nothing in this place where humanity's fate hung in the balance. They had come here hoping to negotiate, to find a place for their species among the stars. Instead, they found themselves on trial for the crime of being human. Supreme Chancellor Vexera rose from her throne of living metal, her ethereal form shimmering with contained energy. The ethereals were ancient beings who had transcended physical form millennia ago, becoming creatures of pure thought and will. When she spoke, her voice resonated through the chamber like a whisper that could shatter mountains. Humanity of a soul system, she began, her words carrying the weight of cosmic authority. You stand accused before this tribunal of crimes against the natural order of the galaxy. Your species has been observed for exactly 100 Earth years, and in that time, you have proven yourselves to be what we have come to term the plague species. Elena's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. The diplomatic protocols were clear. She was here to listen, not to defend. Not yet, Vexera gestured, and the holographic displays shifted to show Earth's history in brutal detail. Wars raged across the projections, cities burned, and weapons of mass destruction turned entire landscapes into radioactive wastelands. The images were carefully selected, showing humanity at its absolute worst. In your brief existence as a spacefaring species, you have demonstrated an unprecedented capacity for violence and destruction. You war among yourselves, constantly poisoning your own world in your quest for dominance. When you finally achieved interstellar travel, you immediately began to spread this violence to other worlds. The accusations continued, each one supported by evidence that humanity could not deny. The Coalition had been watching, recording, cataloging every human conflict, every environmental disaster, every act of aggression. They had built a case that painted humanity as a cancer that would spread throughout the galaxy if left unchecked, the doctor. Chin stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Your Excellence, if I may speak in humanity's defense. Yes, we have had conflicts. Yes, we have made mistakes. But we have also shown remarkable capacity for growth, for learning from our errors. Our species has achieved great things when we work together. We have art, music, literature that speaks to the beauty of existence. We have scientific achievements that rival any in the galaxy. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembly. The Coalition representatives, beings of crystal and light, of living metal and pure energy, looked upon the human diplomat with something that resembled pity. You speak of growth, replied Vexera. Yet in the century we have observed you, your wars have only grown more devastating. You speak of art, yet your entertainment glorifies violence. You speak of science, yet your greatest achievements have been in the creation of weapons. Your species is fundamentally flawed, driven by primitive instincts that make you incompatible with civilized galactic society. Elena felt her composure cracking. We are not perfect, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. But we are not monsters. We are a young species, still learning, still growing. Give us time, and we will prove that we can be better. The chamber fell silent again, and Elena realized she had just violated every diplomatic protocol by speaking out of turn. But the words had needed to be said. Someone had to defend humanity, even if it was futile. Vexera's form flickered with what might have been amusement. Time, Captain Vasquez? You ask for time? Your species has existed for less than a cosmic heartbeat, yet, in that brief span, You have brought more chaos to this galaxy than species that have existed for millions of years. You are a statistical impossibility, a cosmic accident that threatens the stability of everything we have built. The evidence continued to mount. The Coalition had documented humanity's expansion into space, showing how human colonies had disrupted local ecosystems, how human mining operations had stripped entire asteroids bare, how human military vessels had engaged in combat with indigenous species that had been no threat to anyone. Your species, Vexthera continued, possesses a unique combination of intelligence, aggression, and adaptability that makes you exceptionally dangerous. You learn quickly, you spread rapidly, and you destroy everything in your path. If we allow you to continue your expansion, you will eventually threaten every peaceful species in the galaxy. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. There were beings of pure energy from the Nexus Collective, crystalline entities from the Harmonic Resonance, and dozens of other species that had achieved harmony with their environments and each other. They all watched humanity with the same expression of fear and disgust. "What do you propose?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Vexthera's form brightened, and when she spoke, her voice carried the finality of a cosmic verdict. The Celestial Coalition has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity will be exiled from this galaxy. You will be given exactly 72 Earth hours to gather your people and depart. Any human vessel found within the galactic boundaries after that time will be destroyed without warning. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Exile, not destruction, but something almost worse. They were being cast out into the void, condemned to wander the empty spaces between galaxies where nothing could survive. "You cannot be serious," Dr. Chen stammered. "There are 12 billion humans in this galaxy. Our entire civilization, our history, our culture, everything we have built. You are talking about genocide." "We are talking about survival," Vexthera replied coldly. "The survival of every other species in this galaxy. Your exile is not meant to be cruel, Dr. Chen. It is meant to be final. The void between galaxies is vast and empty. There are no resources there, no worlds to colonize, no other species to threaten. You will find the peace there that you have never been able to achieve among the stars." Elena realized what the Chancellor was saying. This was not exile. This was a death sentence disguised as mercy. They were being sent to die slowly in the cold emptiness of intergalactic space, far from any hope of survival or return. "We have families," Elena said quietly, "children who have never known war, who have never harmed anyone. Are you condemning them as well?" For the first time, Vexthera's form seemed to flicker with something that might have been regret. The young of the plague species are still carriers of the plague. They will grow to become what their parents were. This is not a decision we make lightly, Captain Vasquez. It is a decision we make out of necessity. The tribunal was ending. Elena could feel the weight of finality settling over the chamber like a shroud. In 72 hours, humanity would be gone from the galaxy that had been their home for barely a century. They would be cast into the void with whatever ships they could gather, condemned to drift in the darkness until their resources ran out and their species died. Elena straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the Supreme Chancellor. "We will remember this day," she said, her voice carrying a promise that surprised even her. "We will remember who we were, and who you forced us to become." Vexthera's form pulsed with ethereal light. "There will be nothing to remember, Captain. The void claims all things eventually. Your species will be forgotten, a footnote in the galaxy's history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked aggression." The chamber began to fade around them as the tribunal's judgment took effect. Elena felt the familiar tingle of transportation technology engaging, preparing to send them back to the human embassy ship that waited in orbit around the neutral world of Axis Prime. As the crystalline walls dissolved into light, Elena caught one last glimpse of the Supreme Chancellor's ethereal form. The ancient being was already turning away, dismissing humanity as a problem solved, a threat eliminated. The other coalition representatives were dispersing, returning to their own perfect worlds and their own perfect civilizations. Doctor Chin appeared beside her in the transport beam, his face pale with shock. Elena, he whispered, what are we going to do? Elena looked at him with eyes that had suddenly become as hard as the void they were being sent to. We are going to survive, Marcus. We are going to gather our people, and we are going to find a way to live in the darkness they are sending us to. And someday, when we are strong enough, we are going to return. The transport beam completed its cycle, and they materialized aboard the human embassy ship. Around them, the crew was already receiving the news of the tribunal's verdict through official channels. Elena could see the despair in their faces, the fear in their eyes as they realized what this meant for their species. Commander Zara Okafor approached, her military bearing intact despite the circumstances. Captain, we have 72 hours. The Colonial Defense Fleet is already beginning evacuation procedures from all human worlds. We estimate we can evacuate perhaps 8 billion people if we use every available vessel. Elena nodded grimly. 4 billion humans would be left behind to face whatever punishment the coalition had in store for them. It was an impossible choice, but it was the only choice they had. Begin the evacuation, Elena ordered. Military personnel and essential civilians first. We will need every person we can save if we are going to survive what is coming. As the crew dispersed to carry out her orders, Elena stood alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars that had briefly been humanity's home. Somewhere out there, beyond the galaxy's edge, lay the void that would either be their grave or their salvation. She thought about Vexthera's words, about humanity being a plague species, about being incompatible with civilized galactic society. Perhaps the coalition was right. Perhaps humanity was too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous to be trusted among the stars. But as she watched the first evacuation ships beginning their desperate journey toward the galactic rim, Elena made a promise to herself and to her species. If they were going to be cast out as monsters, then monsters they would become. The void would either destroy them or forge them into something the galaxy had never seen before. In 72 hours, humanity would leave the galaxy as refugees. But Elena had a feeling that when they returned, it would be as something far more dangerous than the coalition had ever imagined. The exile was about to begin, and with it the transformation of humanity from victims to victors. The void awaited, dark and empty, and full of terrible possibilities. Forged in darkness 75 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and Admiral Kai Nakamura stood on the observation deck of the flagship Void Sovereign, staring into the absolute darkness that had become humanity's home. Born in the emptiness between galaxies, he had never seen a natural star, never breathed planetary air, never felt sunlight on his skin. The void was all he had ever known, and it had made him into something the galaxy had never encountered before. The transformation had not been immediate. In the early years after the exile, the human fleet had drifted through the intergalactic space like a dying organism, slowly consuming its own resources while searching desperately for anything that could sustain life. Nearly half of the 8 billion evacuees had died in those first brutal decades, succumbing to radiation, starvation, and the psychological torment of endless darkness. Kai's grandmother, Elena Vasquez, had lived to see the worst of those times before dying in the 37th year of exile. But she had also lived to see the discovery that changed everything, the moment when humanity's curse became their greatest advantage. The doctor. Arya Volkov approached the admiral from behind, her footsteps silent on the deck, plating that seemed to absorb sound as efficiently as it absorbed light. Like Kai, she was void-born, her pale skin almost translucent. Her eyes adapted to see in spectrums of darkness that baseline humans could never perceive. In her hands, she carried a chunk of crystalline material that pulsed with internal energy, casting dancing shadows across the observation deck. The latest harvest exceeded all projections, she reported, her voice carrying the distinctive hollow tone of the Voidborn. The crystal fields in Sector 7 are producing enough raw energy to power the entire fleet for the next 50 years. Kai nodded, taking the crystal fragment and feeling its warmth against his palm. The void crystals had been humanity's salvation. Discovered floating in the empty space between galaxies like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. They were unlike anything in known science, structures of crystallized dark matter that contained vast amounts of energy in stable form. The first crystal had been found by accident when a dying transport ship had collided with what sensors showed as empty space. Instead of destroying the vessel, the impact had revealed a massive crystal formation, invisible to conventional detection, but solid enough to anchor an entire civilization. How are the children adapting to the new enhancement protocols? Kai asked, referring to the latest generation of void-born humans who were undergoing experimental procedures to better interface with crystal technology. Aria's expression grew thoughtful. Better than we hoped. The latest group is showing integration rates of nearly 90%. They are becoming something new, Admiral, something that has never existed before. Kai understood what she meant. The children of the void were not simply adapted humans. They were evolving into something else entirely, their biology altered by decades of exposure to dark matter radiation, and their psychology shaped by the infinite darkness of intergalactic space. They could survive in vacuum for hours, see in absolute darkness, and most remarkably, they could interface directly with void crystal technology through neural implants that would kill any baseline human. General Rex Morrison entered the observation deck, his massive frame enhanced with visible crystal augmentations that glowed softly beneath his skin. Once a normal human soldier, Rex had volunteered for the first experimental enhancement procedures and emerged as something between man and machine, his body a hybrid of flesh and crystalline technology. Admiral, the final squadron reports are in, Rex announced, his voice carrying harmonic overtones that resonated with the ship's crystal matrix. All fleet elements are in position and ready for the return protocol. Kai turned away from a viewport and faced his senior staff. These were the leaders of the new humanity, beings forged in the crucible of exile and transformed by technologies that the Celestial Coalition could never have imagined. They were preparing to return to the galaxy, not as the refugees who had been cast out, but as something far more dangerous. Captain Luna Hayes materialized from the shadows near the deck's edge, her form flickering slightly as she transitioned from her phase-shifted state back to normal space-time. The Void-born had developed abilities that seemed to violate the laws of physics, able to exist partially outside normal reality when interfaced with crystal technology. Long-range reconnaissance confirms the Coalition's military positions, Luna reported, her voice seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Their fleet deployments remain consistent with pre-exile patterns. They have no idea what is coming. Kai smiled, and the expression was not entirely human. His teeth had developed a crystalline structure over the decades, growing harder and sharper as his body adapted to the void environment. Of course they do not. They believe we died in the darkness decades ago. They sleep peacefully in their perfect galaxy, confident that they solved the human problem permanently. The transformation of humanity had been driven by more than just biological adaptation. Professor David Kim, the fleet's chief technology officer, had spent decades studying the void crystals and developing applications that pushed the boundaries of known science. The crystals could store vast amounts of information, process data at quantum speeds, and most importantly manipulate space-time in ways that made faster-than-light travel look primitive. The crystal matrix network is fully operational. David reported through the ship's neural interface, his consciousness distributed throughout the vessel's crystal core. We can phase the entire fleet directly into galaxy space without crossing the boundary zone. The Coalition's early warning systems will not detect our approach. Kai nodded approvingly. The void crystals had given humanity capabilities that went far beyond anything the Coalition possessed. They could exist partially outside normal space-time, making their ships effectively invisible to conventional sensors. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, allowing them to create weapons and defenses that operated on principles the galaxy's civilizations had never encountered. But the most significant change was not technological. It was psychological. The humans who had been cast into the void had been broken down to their most basic elements and rebuilt into something harder, colder, and infinitely more determined. They had stared into the abyss for 75 years, and the abyss had stared back. What emerged from that exchange was no longer recognizably human in any traditional sense. Status report on the Judgment Protocol, Kai ordered, referring to the comprehensive plan for humanity's return that had been developing for decades. Arya consulted her crystal interface, data flowing directly into her enhanced neural pathways. All target zones have been identified and prioritized. Coalition military installations, government centers, and population hubs are mapped and ready for simultaneous engagement. The first wave will neutralize their ability to coordinate a response. Rex's augmented features shifted into what might have been a grin. The second wave will demonstrate our new capabilities. I estimate complete coalition surrender within 72 hours of initial contact. Kai found the timing appropriate. 72 hours had been the deadline the coalition had given humanity to evacuate the galaxy. It seemed fitting that their defeat would take the same amount of time. And the civilian populations, Kai asked, though he already knew the answer. They will be given the same choice the coalition gave us, Luna replied her. Phase shifted form becoming more solid as emotion strengthened her connection to normal space-time. Exile or extinction. Though, unlike the coalition, we will actually allow them to choose. The moral calculus of the Voidborn was different from their ancestors. 75 years of struggle for survival had taught them that mercy was a luxury that only the strong could afford. They had learned to think in terms of species-level survival, making decisions that their grandparents would have found horrifying, but that were perfectly logical from the perspective of cosmic evolution, the Doctor. Volkov pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. The Coalition had grown complacent in humanity's absence. Their military forces reduced, their vigilance relaxed. They had divided into competing factions, with the Ethereals, the Crystalline Harmonics, and the Energy Collectives all vying for dominance over the lesser species. Intelligence reports suggest they have made no significant technological advances since our exile, Arya noted. Their society has stagnated without an external threat to drive innovation. They will be fighting with weapons and tactics that are centuries out of date. Kai studied the display, noting the positions of coalition fleets and the distribution of their major installations. The galaxy that had once seemed so vast and powerful now looked fragile and vulnerable. The void had taught humanity patience, and that patience was about to pay enormous dividends. Begin the final phase of preparation, Kai ordered. All ships are to complete their crystal integration protocols. I want every vessel operating at maximum efficiency when we cross back into galaxy space. As his staff dispersed to carry out the orders, Kai remained alone on the observation deck, contemplating the journey that had brought them to this moment. The void had taken everything from humanity, stripped away their home, their history, their very identity as a species. But in return, it had given them something far more valuable, the power to reshape the galaxy according to their will. The void crystals hummed around him, their energy signature resonating through the ship's structure and into his enhanced nervous system. He could feel the presence of the entire human fleet through the crystal network, thousands of ships and millions of void-born humans, all connected through the crystalline matrix that had become their new evolutionary path. They were no longer the primitive, violent species that the Coalition had feared. They had transcended those limitations, becoming something that operated on a higher level of existence. They were still human in their core identity, but they were human refined and perfected by the crucible of exile. Captain Hayes materialized beside him, her form shifting between states of existence as she interfaced with the ship's quantum systems. Admiral, the fleet reports ready for translation. All ships are synchronized and waiting for your command. Kai placed his hand on the crystal control interface, feeling the vast network of human consciousness that lay behind it. Somewhere in that network were the memories of Elena Vasquez and all the others who had died, bringing them to this moment. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten, and their dream of humanity's return would finally be realized. Signal all ships, Kai commanded, his voice carrying through the crystal network to every vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Nakamura. Today we go home. Today, we reclaim what was stolen from us. Today, the galaxy learns that humanity cannot be destroyed, only transformed. The void crystals began to resonate at frequencies that bent space-time around the fleet. Reality flickered and twisted as the ships prepared to phase back into normal galactic space. The darkness that had been their home for 75 years began to recede as artificial stars of crystalline energy illuminated the void. Initiate translation protocol, Kai ordered. Take us home. The human fleet vanished from the void between galaxies, leaving behind only empty darkness and the fading resonance of crystal energy. They were returning to the galaxy, not as the exiled refugees they had been, but as the harbingers of a new cosmic order. The Coalition was about to discover that their attempt to solve the human problem had instead created something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The exile was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The Empire returns the detection. Alarms screamed through the Coalition monitoring station at the galaxy's edge, their piercing wail echoing off crystalline walls that had known nothing but peaceful silence for decades. Senior analyst Zeph Tai of the Ethereal Collective stared at her displays in disbelief, her translucent form flickering with confusion and growing terror. Impossible readings flooded her screens. Massive energy signatures were appearing throughout the galaxy simultaneously, not at the rim where any invasion should logically begin, but deep within Coalition space itself. Thousands of contacts, each one larger than anything in the Coalition databases, materializing out of what appeared to be folded spacetime. High Command, this is Monitoring Station Omega. Zeph Tai transmitted, her mental voice carrying harmonics of barely controlled panic. We have massive, unknown contacts appearing in all sectors. Repeat, unknown fleet elements are manifesting throughout Coalition space. The response came within seconds, carrying the unmistakable authority of Supreme Chancellor Vexera herself. Explain the nature of these contacts, analyst Zeph Tai. Our deep space sensors detected no approaching fleets. Chancellor, they did not approach. They simply appeared, as if translating directly from another dimension. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. And, Chancellor, Zeph Tai paused, checking her readings again to be certain. The quantum resonance patterns match archived data from the extinct human species. The silence that followed was longer and more ominous than the space between galaxies. When Vexera's response finally came, it carried overtones of fear that Zeph Tai had never heard from the ancient being. That is impossible. Humanity died in the void 75 years ago. Continue monitoring and prepare full tactical analysis. But even as the Chancellor spoke, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. The impossible had become reality. Humanity had returned. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Vengeance, watching as Coalition defensive fleets scrambled to respond to humanity's sudden appearance. The Void-born Admiral was a masterpiece of crystalline enhancement, his body a hybrid of flesh and living crystal that allowed him to interface directly with the ship's quantum systems. Coalition Fleet Alpha is moving to intercept our position near the Nexus worlds, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Torres. Like all the Void-born, Torres existed partially outside normal spacetime, her consciousness distributed between her physical form and the ship's crystal matrix. Chin smiled, an expression that would have terrified any baseline human who saw it. His teeth had grown into sharp, crystalline formations over the decades, and his eyes now glowed with the same internal light as the void crystals that powered his ship. Let them come. It has been 75 years since the galaxy saw what humanity can do when properly motivated. The first engagement took place near the Harmony Cluster, where a Coalition patrol fleet of 30 ships encountered a single human vessel. The Coalition commander, Admiral Crestan of the Crystal Resonance ordered his ships to maintain defensive formation while transmitting standard warnings. Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Coalition space. Identify yourself and prepare to be boarded for inspection. The human response came not in words, but in action. The strange dark ship simply vanished from normal space, reappearing instantly inside the Coalition formation. What followed was not a battle, but a demonstration of technological superiority that redefined the meaning of warfare. The human ship's weapons operated on principles that the Coalition had never encountered. Dark matter cannons fired projectiles that existed partially outside normal space-time, passing through Coalition shields and armor as if they were not there. When the projectiles reached their targets, they phased back into normal reality inside the enemy ships, tearing them apart from within. In less than 10 minutes, Admiral Crestan's entire fleet was disabled, not destroyed, but carefully neutralized, their crews alive but helpless as human boarding parties materialized throughout their ships like ghosts given solid form. Captain Luna Hayes led the boarding of Crestan's flagship, her form shifting between dimensions as she moved through the crystalline corridors of the Coalition vessel. The Crystal Resonance crew cowered before her, their harmonic communication frequencies disrupted by the quantum field she generated. I am Captain Hayes of the Human Void Empire, she announced, her voice carrying overtones that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your fleet has been captured as the opening move in humanity's return to this galaxy. You will convey a message to your government. Admiral Crestan struggled to maintain his composure as he faced the transformed human. Her appearance was unsettling in ways that his crystal-based psychology could barely process. She looked human, but wrong, as if she existed in several realities at once. What message? He managed to ask. Luna's smile was sharp as a blade. Tell them that the exile is over. Tell them that humanity has returned, and we remember everything. Tell them that they have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally or face the consequences of their actions. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human forces announced their presence through carefully orchestrated displays of overwhelming power. Coalition fleets found themselves outmatched not just in numbers, but in fundamental technological capability. Human ships could appear and disappear at will, their weapons could strike targets regardless of defensive measures, and their crews seemed to exist outside the normal laws of physics that on the Coalition capital world of Axis Prime, Supreme Chancellor Vextherock convened an emergency session of the High Council. The chamber that had once witnessed humanity's exile now echoed with panicked discussions as the galaxy's leaders struggled to comprehend what they were facing. The reports are consistent across all sectors, announced General Prime Zelnaga of the Harmonic Resonance. Human forces have appeared simultaneously at strategic points throughout Coalition space. Their technology appears to be based on principles we do not understand. Counselor Merton of the Energy Collective added her own observations. Our intelligence suggests they have been somehow enhanced during their time in the void. They demonstrate capabilities that should be impossible for biological entities. Vexthera's ethereal form flickered with distress as she processed the incoming data. The humans had not just survived their exile to the void between galaxies, they had thrived and evolved into something that defied all Coalition understanding of biological and technological development. How many ships do they have? She asked. Conservative estimates suggest at least 10,000 vessels, each one equivalent to our heaviest battleships, Zelnaga replied. But Chancellor, their individual capabilities far exceed anything in our fleets. They appear to operate with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single intelligence. The truth was even more disturbing than the Coalition realized. The Voidborn humans were connected through their crystal matrix network, sharing thoughts and experiences across their entire civilization. They functioned not as individuals, but as components of a vast, distributed intelligence that could make decisions and coordinate actions at the speed of thought. Emperor Kai Nakamura materialized in the Coalition capital system aboard his flagship, the massive dreadnought Sovereign Darkness. The ship was a work of art and terror, its crystalline hull absorbing light while generating fields that bent space-time around it. It appeared in orbit above Axis Prime like a dark moon, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. Kai's message to the Coalition was broadcast simultaneously to every world in the galaxy, his enhanced voice carrying through quantum channels that bypassed all defensive filters. People of the Celestial Coalition, I am Emperor Kai Nakamura of the Human Void Empire. 75 years ago, you exiled my people to the darkness between galaxies, condemning us to death because you feared what we might become. Today, we have returned to show you that your fears were justified. The image that accompanied his words showed the Emperor in his full crystalline enhancement, his form a hybrid of human biology and void crystal technology that represented the pinnacle of post-human evolution. His eyes glowed with the same dark energy that powered his ships, and his presence seemed to distort reality around him. We offer you the same choice you offered us, exile or extinction. You have 72 hours to evacuate this galaxy. Any Coalition vessel found within galactic boundaries after that time will be destroyed. The response from the Coalition was immediate and desperate. Supreme Chancellor Vexthera herself transmitted a reply, her ancient voice carrying tones of plea that her species had not used in millennia. Emperor Nakamura, please. The decision to exile humanity was made from fear, not malice. We can negotiate. We can find a peaceful solution that allows both our civilizations to coexist. Kai's laugh was like the sound of crystal shattering in absolute cold. Peaceful solution? You had 75 years to consider peaceful solutions while my people died in the void. You chose fear over wisdom, exile over cooperation. Now you face the consequences of that choice. What followed was not a war in any conventional sense, but a systematic demonstration of humanity's new capabilities. Coalition military installations found their defenses useless against weapons that operated in dimensions they could not perceive. Human forces could strike anywhere in the galaxy, instantly coordinate their actions across impossible distances, and adapt to any defensive strategy faster than the Coalition could implement it. The siege of the ethereal homeworld lasted exactly 1 hour. Human ships phased into the system's core, bypassing all defensive formations, and systematically disabled every military asset in the system. The ancient, ethereal civilization, which had existed as pure thought for millions of years, found themselves helpless against an enemy that operated on principles they could not comprehend. Director Maya Patel, the Empire's intelligence chief, coordinated the occupation of Coalition territories with ruthless efficiency. The void-born humans did not destroy the civilizations they encountered, but instead absorbed them into their growing empire. Coalition species were given the choice: serve the new human order or face relocation to the void. The galaxy has new management, Maya announced to the captured Coalition leadership. Those who adapt will survive. Those who resist will join their predecessors in the darkness between stars. The transformation was not just military, but cultural. The human empire imposed a new order based on strength, efficiency, and the harsh lessons learned in the void. The perfect, peaceful civilizations of the Coalition were restructured according to human principles of survival and adaptation. Ambassador Sarah Cross, one of the few baseline humans to survive the enhancement process, served as the Empire's diplomatic representative to the surrendering Coalition species. Her role was to manage the transition from the old galactic order to the new human hegemony. Your civilizations stagnated in peace, she explained to the assembled Coalition representatives. You grew weak and complacent. Humanity will teach you what we learned in the void: that strength comes from adversity, that progress requires struggle, and that survival demands constant evolution. The final ceremony took place in the same crystalline chamber where humanity had been sentenced to exile decades earlier. Supreme Chancellor Vexthera, now stripped of all authority and awaiting her own exile to the void, knelt before Emperor Kai Nakamura as he formally claimed dominion over the galaxy. You were right about us, Kai said, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's ethereal light. We were dangerous, we were violent, we were incompatible with your perfect civilization. But instead of destroying us, you made us stronger. The void taught us lessons that paradise never could. Vextara's ethereal form flickered with defeat and resignation. What have we created? She whispered. Kai's smile was cold as the space between stars. You created your successors. The galaxy belongs to humanity now, and we will reshape it according to principles forged in darkness and tempered by exile. The age of peace is over. The age of evolution has begun. As the former coalition leaders were loaded onto ships bound for the void, Kai stood in the chamber where humanity's exile had been decreed and contemplated the empire they had built from darkness and determination. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities that their ancestors could never have imagined. The exile had ended not with humanity's return, but with their ascension to power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were no longer the species that had been cast out in fear and ignorance. They were something new, something forged in the crucible of the void and tempered by 75 years of struggle. The human void empire had claimed its birthright, and the galaxy would never be the same.